Anil Devradekar, Founding Dean of the School of Public Policy at UC Riverside. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to today's special event on the state of immigrants in the Inland Empire. This event is brought to you by the UCR Center for Social Innovation, which is a research center of the School of Public Policy, in partnership with the California Immigrant Policy Center and the Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice. Additionally, today's report would not have been possible without a generous grant from the James Irvine Foundation. So thanks to all our partners and to the Irvine Foundation for supporting this work. The next few hours will showcase the results of collaborations between academic researchers and community partners to address immigration, which is one of the most important issues facing our region. We at the UCR School of Public Policy are proud to support today's event. And I'm going to give you a small plug for our School of Public Policy. As I do every time I'm asked to welcome an audience to one of the activities that our school or our school center promotes. Our school's motto is solutions for the region, solutions for the world. At UCR School of Public Policy, we work in partnership with our communities, policymakers, entrepreneurs, and business leaders to bring fresh thinking to the complex policy change challenges facing our region. And not just our region, but our state and the nation and the world. Our mission is to develop our students to become the next generation of policy and community leaders who can bring fresh, bold thinking to the complex challenges facing communities throughout the state and the nation. And immigration is one of these challenges. It's at the forefront of the agenda these days. As background, UCR was only the third UC campus in the 10-campus UC system to establish a School of Public Policy. We still remain the only UC campus to offer an undergraduate program in public policy. And we are the only major university in Inland Southern California to offer a master's in public policy program. Our program, which launched in 2015, is now welcoming its fourth cohort of MPP students. So if you know of any young people, doesn't have to be young. If you know of any idealistic folks who want to go out and change the world through policy solutions, policy innovations, please tell them about our School of Public Policy MPP program. We pride ourselves in the student leaders that we produce. So we are looking forward to the illuminating presentations that will be presented today, as well as the continuing and ongoing collaborations between our school and the local and regional community. At this point, I would like to introduce Karthik Ramakrishnan, who is Associate Dean of the UC Riverside School of Public Policy and Professor of Public Policy and Political Science. Actually, I think he deserves the title of Professor at Large because he sort of works on a variety of topics. You give an interesting topic to Karthik and he is willing to jump on it and work on it. He is the founder and director of the Center for Social Innovation, which was just launched a couple of months back. He's also board member of the California Endowment, chair of the California Commission on APIA Affairs, and adjunct fellow of the Public Policy Institute of California. He received his PhD in politics from Princeton University and has held fellowships at the Russell Sage Foundation and the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. Please join me in giving him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Anil, and thank you all for being here. so exciting to actually have this in our hands. I can't tell you how much time we spent on this, and it's not quite hot off the presses, but it's a day off the presses. So it's a real treat to be here, to see the amazing audience that we have, not only in terms of its size, but the kinds of people that we have in the room today, the kinds of talent, the kinds of experiences, the deep knowledge that we have in the audience. So I'm humbled to be here. I'm just going to go through some of the key findings that you'll see in this report, but this was a true collaboration with ICIJ and CIPC. And as Cynthia put it, as we were going through the language for the save the date, it's an evolving partnership, and it's in the early stages, but I think just from the look of it, it looks good and promising in terms of what we can achieve with a statewide policy entity like CIPC, with an organization, a coalition like ICIJ, and with the UCR School of Public Policy that tries to bring credible research to inform the problems facing the region and facing the state. So you all have this report. We also have infographics on our website. We also have an organizational directory on our website. We will continue to add more data. We really want this to be a resource for the community. And I think that's one of the things that the James Irvine Foundation and the Weingart Foundation saw in us, is the potential for us to serve as a resource to help inform discussions and debates, but importantly, solutions that can benefit the region. I'll also give thanks to the Community Foundation of Riverside and San Bernardino counties, who is a publicity co-sponsor for this event. And I can already tell that with our Center for Social Innovation that we're going to do a lot of collaboration in the months and years ahead. And it's great to be able to do this kind of broad collaborative work. And also having people in the room that you might not typically think of as immigrant service providers or people who are concerned about immigration or serve immigrants. So thrilled to be here. I'll just say a little bit about our center. And some of you were at our launch, so hopefully this is not too repetitive. The main theme of our center is to recognize the talent that already exists in Inland California and Inland Southern California, or the Inland. When we think about innovation, the dominant image of innovation in California is to think about innovation as happening on the coast. So if you're talking about biotech down in San Diego, if you're talking about high tech and media and the media industry in Venice and Santa Monica, or if you go all the way up to the Bay Area, talk about biotech and high tech, the dominant image is that innovation in California happens on the coast, and there's no disputing that. But what we fail to recognize is that innovation also occurs in Inland California. The dominant image of Inland California is an area of need and of problems. And we're not going to paper over those things. It's not to say that those needs and problems do not exist. But if our dominant narrative is to say, here are our needs, here are our problems, it's very difficult to get people to invest in us, even within our region, but certainly outside our region, if we're talking about philanthropy or even with public entities like state government. So part of our effort is to change the narrative, but it's not just about spin. It's not just about PR to say, look how amazing we are. It's to boost confidence in the work that is happening, to support the work that is happening, and to find the synergy. Because there's so much good work happening, but it's often in isolation from each other. So part of our goal is to bring together convenings like this, but also to build strong partnerships where the power of the collective and the synergy between different activities can truly change the dynamic in terms of how we see ourselves and how others see us. So why CSI? So first, when I talked about CSI Riverside, my partner said, maybe we should start filming here. Like CSI Miami, so CSI UCR. But CSI is about promoting collaborative research, policy innovation, and narrative change. And the goal is to more fully realize the region's potential in terms of civic activities, philanthropic investments, and the health of the nonprofit sector. We are fortunate to have the confidence and investments of foundations like the James Irvine Foundation that has long invested in this region. The Weingart Foundation, which has also invested in this region and more generally seeks to strengthen the power of the nonprofit sector throughout Southern California, and the Wallace Age Culture Foundation, which invests heavily in the Asian American and Hispanic community. But it's not just about us. Some of this you'll see, you may remember from the launch that we had, but it's also evident in the room today. We cannot do this alone, so we depend on partnerships, with partnerships like the Community Foundation, like the Desert Healthcare District and the RAP Foundation and One Future Coachella Valley. These are important partners in the Coachella Valley that we're already started to build some plans around, and we're going to get going on work very soon. With other institutions of higher education, like Cal State San Bernardino and the San Bernardino Community College District. And thank you to San Bernardino Community College District and KBCR for being here to help us with telling these local stories. Especially with the kind of media environment that we face today, it's so vital for us to have local facts, but also local storytelling to help inform public policy. We're also involved in projects like IEGO, which is Inland Economic Growth and Opportunity. And that's a collaboration with the Brookings Institution and various stakeholders in the public and private sector, and funded in part by the support of the James Irvine Foundation. And also what you see today with ICIJ and work that we're doing in collaboration with Inland Empowerment. And there are many more collaborations that we're starting to explore. One of the things that's humbling is when we start getting attention, we see so many people that are excited about us and want to partner with us. So please have some patience if we don't get to it right away, because we're trying to execute on the things that we committed to. But we're very excited about the future of what we can do together in collaboration. Okay, that's a huge wind-up. I'm going to try to go quickly through the data. State of immigrants in the Inland Empire. So first of all, what you'll see in this report is this question of should we be using the term Inland Empire? This is going to be part of a longer conversation that various stakeholders are going to have in the region. And based on the research that we have, and I'll say we're fortunate to have Michelle McGowan, who just joined as Associate Director. She'll be moderating the next panel. Michelle has a PhD in urban planning with a specialty in the history of place. We're just lucky to have Michelle here in general. She just got a 40 under 40 award from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. But to address a question like, what is the history of immigrants in this region? And even let's try to excavate this notion of Inland Empire. Michelle's expertise and training has been very vital. And there's a lot more of that to come. One thing I'll say that you'll see in the report, I'm not going to go over the history, there's a fair amount of text there. An important intervention that Michelle had in terms of telling this history is that we had a history talking about Asian and Latino immigrants, and she said, well, what about the Native population here? What about the African American population here? And so it's not just to see immigrants in isolation, but to see where we fit in terms of other racialized groups that are here. So I invite you to read that section, because we, especially for someone with a historical training, condensing, 200 to 400 pages of text to 2 pages is an unfair task, but I think we do a fair amount of justice to the key dynamics that are relevant to the arrival, settlement, and integration of immigrants in this region. We also have a section talking about changes in federal immigration law that affect the populations here over time, as well as state policies that are relevant to the lives and livelihoods of people who live here. In addition to all of that historical background, I have a training in political science. I do survey research, but I also have a background in demography. And it always, to some extent, some of the data might not be surprising, but a lot of times when you actually sit down and cut the data in different ways, and in this instance, to cut the data in terms of Riverside County and San Bernardino County, they look different from what you might typically expect in terms of immigrants in California or immigrants in Southern California. And so we have many tables here that go into that. I'll just hit some of the key points. The immigrant population is growing in this region, so we have nearly 1 million immigrants in this 2-county region today. That's big, right? So that's about 1 out of every 5. So we have approaching now close to 5 million residents in the region, but 1 out of every 5 residents in this region is an immigrant. And the population is growing rapidly, especially in Riverside County, in terms of the foreign-born population. There's also an increasing share of immigrants who are citizens. By the way, these 2 graphs are not in the report. You'll see it on our website as we continue to add more layers of data. But there's a big increase in the share of the foreign-born who are naturalized U.S. citizens. So that's another important part of the story that we typically don't hear when we think about the immigrant population in this region. Now, being an immigrant is not synonymous with being Latino, and being Latino is not synonymous with being an immigrant. A lot of people don't realize that. I was just recently at a public meeting. In fact, I'm honored to say that my city council member from the city of Oakland, who I did not even know was going to be here, is here to get informed on the facts of immigrants in our region, given some pretty fiery political debates that are coursing through the days of our region there. But being Latinos is not synonymous with being immigrant. Being immigrant is not synonymous with being Latino. In fact, most Latinos in the region are not foreign-born. This is not to say that they're unaffected by enforcement, because the way racial profiling works, as it connects with immigration enforcement, is that Latinos, regardless of their nativity, are at risk of being detained, being harassed, or facing other kinds of unfair law enforcement practices. The Asian population, by race, is predominantly immigrant in this region. Right? There's a much smaller share of Asian Americans who are native-born than foreign-born. You also see differences in terms of the naturalized versus the non-citizen population for each of these groups. Another important fact when we look at the immigrant population in Riverside and San Bernardino County is that it's more Latino-heavy than LA County and other parts of Southern California. Right? And this is important because we think of the Latino population. Another stereotype that people have in mind when they think of the Latino population in Southern California, they think about LA. They don't think about Inland Empire. Right? But the IE is the only region that has a majority Latino population when compared to the other counties in Southern California. And the immigrant population is more predominantly Latino here than elsewhere in Southern California or in the state of California. Another important characteristic of the Latino immigrant population is that it's more predominantly Mexican origin than in other parts of Southern California. And again, if you think about Mexican migration as predominantly an LA story, it's actually a greater part of the Inland Empire story than the LA story. You have more Central Americans and South Americans as part of the immigrant population in LA than you do in the Inland Empire. And so it's just really fascinating the kinds of what the data can tell us to put some context into what we observe on the ground. In terms of the Asian immigrant population, Filipinos are a much larger share of the Asian immigrant population in the Inland Empire than they are in the rest of Southern California. So elsewhere, the Chinese immigrant population, especially in Los Angeles County, is a much greater share of the immigrant population. So geography does matter, right? We cannot just talk about immigrants in Southern California. This is just one example of that. And we have many other examples. So this is a map by census tract of the Latino foreign-born population in the IE. And for people who know the region well, this may not be surprising. So the darkest shades that you see is in the bottom right part of your screen, which is Coachella Valley. But there are other pockets of concentration throughout the region. That's right. So if you talk about Latino immigrants in the Inland Empire, there's virtually no region where you don't have Latino immigrants in the IE. I already said the part about Central Americans accounting for a much smaller share of the immigrant population here than in LA County. We also have data on industry, where immigrants work. So Latino immigrants are more likely to work in agriculture, transportation, and construction than elsewhere in Southern California. And there's county-based differences. Riverside County, you see more construction and agriculture. San Bernardino County, you see more transportation and logistics-related work. In terms of the Asian foreign-born population, it's smaller in the region, but the geographic patterns are different. So here the map gets cut off before you get to Coachella Valley because you don't have as many Asian immigrants in Coachella Valley. But what you see there is the Temecula and Murrieta area. fair amount of immigrants who live there who work and commute down in San Diego. Right? But there's a significant chunk of Asian immigrants who live there. There are also concentrations of Asian immigrants who live in places like Corona, Chino Hills, Rancho Cucamonga, and Loma Linda. If you know some of the major employers in places like Western Riverside and Loma Linda, it would not surprise you to know that Asian immigrants are more likely to work in healthcare in this region than elsewhere in Southern California. These are all important stories that if we just have this very thin understanding of who immigrants are, we miss out on the kind of richness in terms of what brings people here, what they do here, what are their needs and concerns. Some of the needs and concerns of the immigrant population here is similar to the concerns of the resident population more generally. So if you look at those who have a 4-year bachelor's degree or more, the immigrant population, just like the native-born population here, is less likely to have a 4-year college degree than when compared to to their counterparts in LA County and Orange County. Health insurance, there's not as much of a gap between lack of access to health insurance here versus the rest of Southern California, but immigrants in Riverside County and San Bernardino County are less likely to have access to health insurance than immigrants statewide. And then finally, in terms of language access, you don't find much differences between the language needs of immigrants who live here versus immigrants who live in Southern California or in the rest of California. This is important because for a lot of people, they think that immigrants who live here might have gone to LA County and Orange County first and then moved here, and there's a chunk of those who have. But we should not be mistaken in thinking that they don't have language needs. So in fact, there are no significant differences in terms of the language needs of immigrants in the IE versus those living in other parts of Southern California. There's no significant difference in the age profile of immigrants who live here versus in other parts of Southern California, or the gender profile, or the rate of citizenship. We are somewhat more likely to have immigrants who are long-term residents in the United States, those who immigrated here before 1990, but it's not a huge difference. So we have all of this data that you'll see in our report, and as I said, we're going to continue to update them moving forward. I'll just end with some recommendations that we have at the end. One, given what we find in terms of language needs, access to healthcare, and access to higher education, we believe that it's important for public as well as private investments to address these gaps, to make sure that we are able to bridge these divides, not only between immigrants in the native form, but also the immigrants here versus immigrants in Los Angeles County and Orange County, who tend to get a lot more support, financial support, from their local governments as well as from philanthropy. We also argue that more investments are needed to make sure that state policies that benefit immigrants throughout the state can be more fully realized here in this region. It's not just sufficient to pass these policies thinking that miraculously it's going to improve everyone's outcomes. We need to have co-investment by the public sector as well as the private sector to make it possible. And then finally, we have some model local policies. We benefited here heavily from the involvement of CIPC and the kind of work that they do and they support elsewhere in California, with some examples that cities and counties, cities in the 2 counties in our region could follow in terms of taking a proactive stance in terms of solving and addressing the challenges that we face. We also point to examples outside of San Francisco and LA. Many people may think, okay, well, San Francisco and LA, politically we're so different, economically we're so different, there's nothing similar to what we have going on here, so it's a bad example to look to. Well, let's look at examples like Dayton, Ohio, or Louisville, Kentucky, right? And cities that we may think of as within the range of what we can accomplish in the next decade or two. They are part of efforts like Welcoming America. You have cities like San Diego, cities like Salt Lake City. These are not exactly hotbeds of liberalism that have joined partnerships like New American Economy. And then we even just have to look at our own county. Riverside County Board of Supervisors unanimously passed a resolution to continue DACA. And prior to that, they unanimously passed a resolution to push for comprehensive immigration reform. Again, not a hotbed of liberalism here. But these are important constituents, and these are important issues that that our elected officials and other government officials recognize are vital to the success of our region. Thank you. There's a lot more in the report, but now I'll bring up Javier Hernandez from ICIJ, who will talk some more about the coalition and the work that they've been doing.
Hello everyone, thank you all for being here. I want to thank obviously, CIPC, the Center for Social Innovation for supporting this project. Also Cynthia, I believe you were probably the first one to bring it up, right? And so thank you for that. It was a last conversation last year, so it was a few months in the making. So thank you to both of you. I also want to thank our partners that are here. I see a lot of familiar faces, and that's great to see all of you here today. And it really continues to really push all of our team at ICIJ to continue to do the work that we're doing. When we see all of you here today that are supporting the work that we're doing, because this is, after all, our coalition. We're only here because of you also. Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about ICIJ and what we do. So we're the Immigrant Coalition for Immigrant Justice. We're a coalition. We have close to 40 partners at the moment, official and non-official partners. And then our mission is just to convene organizations that really want to fight for justice for immigrants, right? Whether it's policy, whether it's local or statewide, making sure that we're all together. We have one message. When we're really coming to our elected officials and saying, this is why these laws are important to us. This is why we need SB 54, right? This is why we need a sanctuary city policy in your community. And we really connect those elected officials with their constituents, with their community, with the folks that are on the ground, that live in these cities, that have not necessarily been very welcoming of immigrants. The region has not been a region that has been welcoming of immigrants for many years, but that is starting to change. And it is changing because of all the work that has been going on over the last 20 years here, and how that work will continue in the next 10, 15 years from now. And so what you're seeing here is we had a summit, and we had about 20 of our coalition partners attend the summit. And it was at SAU 2015's office. I don't know, they're here somewhere, so they're one of our also great partners in the region as well. So I'm going to start by sharing a little bit about Prop 187. We all know what Prop 187 is, hopefully, right? So it was one of the most, it was one of the most, till this day, I mean, I say this, I feel that this was the worst anti-immigrant policy that was ever passed. Worse than SB 1070 and worse than anything that came after that. Here in California, we had the worst policy that passed by voters, right? Voters in California felt that they needed to somehow stop immigrants from coming into the state. They needed to somehow protect their states, when all we were doing was really contributing more to this to the state. And so I remember 1994 because I was already living in the U.S. as an undocumented kid, as an undocumented kid, and my mother was really scared that he might not be able to go to school anymore. Right, and so what we did, we actually migrated back to Mexico, and then Mexico was worse, so we came back within 3 months. So that was just that's just how it was, for my family. That we wanted to really come and for a better life, and that's why we're here. So it passed, overwhelmingly. We had 58% of the vote, with only 41% of the population voting no on Prop 187. And I did want to talk a little bit about San Bernardino County. As you can see, San Bernardino County voted in favor of this proposition, 68 to 31%. And Riverside, not surprisingly, a little bit higher, 70% to 29%. Right? Then a few years later, someone decided that it would be a great idea to just get all these immigrants that don't necessarily know the language and just start talking to them in English, and maybe they'll misunderstand it in school, right? And so this was proposition was 227. It was English language in public schools, and it also passed overwhelmingly in the state. 60% of the state said yes, maybe we do need just English being in our taught in schools, and it also goes with this notion and this narrative that this is the United States and English is our language, and that was a lot of that was being pushed during this time the message was, oh, it's the best for the children, it's the best for the students, but there was this underlying language of racism right within this law. And so similarly, San Bernardino County supported this measure, 64% to 35%. And then also Riverside County, 67% to 32%. Right, but it was 4 years later, and what we see was there was a little bit of a shift, a little bit. But then if we fast forward, many years now, 2016, there was a referendum on 227. Do we want bilingual education to be taught in our schools? Do we want our children to be able to have access to 2 languages, right, not just one? And also being able to ensure that their success was only possible if we were able to teach our students in a language that they understood, right? And so this was Proposition 58 in 2016. It was a referendum on Prop 227, and that passed, right? So this was like a big change from 1998 to 2016, where it passed with 73% of the vote. No county in California actually went no on this one, and we had 25% of voters in California still believe that. 25? Yeah. That we still needed to keep the other law. But what you see is like a complete shift in like voting from 1994, where it was very anti-immigrant, where we were making it hard for people to live here. So now what we're saying, well, we are the voting population now. Our families are voting. The children of our parents that are now growing up, they're able to vote. And so what we see here is Riverside County, 69% to 30%, and then we had 68 to 31 in Riverside County. So why I bring this up is just to remind everyone in the room that change doesn't happen overnight. Change is a long process sometimes. And what we're seeing in the Inland Empire is the beginning of that change, the beginning of the change when it comes to policy, right? That we're now being able to influence policy that's our policymakers and the policy that's being designed, for our communities. And also, it's also a reminder for those that are elected officials that this is the new demographics. These are the new voters. We care about the issues. We care about keeping our families safe. We care about jobs. We care about the environment. We care about healthcare, right? We're not like a single issue community. And I think I just want to remind folks that that's the main, it's not just all about immigration. We believe in justice in general. And so I think that that's one thing that I want to point out, that this region is rapidly changing. And as it changes, we want to ensure that the elected officials that we have in the county or in our cities, that they are also reflective of the community and also are able to address the needs of the community while they're in power. As you all know, there's this big anti-SB 54 wave coming through California, and it's all politics. There's no real reason why these resolutions are passing. When even the sheriff of San Bernardino has said he doesn't work with ICE, well then why are the cities trying to ask him and push him to work with ICE, right? So I think it's important to note that these anti-SB 54 resolutions that are passing, they are hurtful for the community, and at the end of the day, they're hurtful for those that are in power right now, because it's, like we said, the tide is changing, right? And beyond the politics, our community did, after the election, and even before the election of 2016, there was a lot of fear in the community. There was a lot of fear that ICE would just start coming into our homes, that ICE would just start going into our schools. And also SB 54 protects our resources as a county, as a city, so that we're not facilitating ICE's job and that, breaking and violating civil rights and human rights. And so SB 54, as it's a reminder that this is how laws should work, this is how they should operate. In the Inland Empire, we were able to mobilize our coalition partners to make sure that we had as much support as possible for SB 54, and we're now going to start protecting this big victory that we had, right? And that's the next big step for us. So I'll talk a little bit about why SB 54 was important. This is a little cool, it's really old, right? It's 2008, but the reason why I chose this one was because for many years, our local law enforcement would say, we're not working with ICE, what are you talking about? Well, since 2008, our local law enforcement has been working with ICE, including up to SB 54, yeah, a little bit before. Cities like Riverside, the police department did have a 287G and Secure Communities Agreement, right, with ICE and Border Patrol. Sorry, with ICE, but with the Department of Homeland Security. And what's really striking to me is that this was the most productive 287G agencies as of 2008, and we're top 4, both of our counties. Right, we were in the top of the list, and this is nationwide. If you can see, there's North Carolina, there's Arkansas, Tennessee, and we were top 4 as to our communities were being. Any contact that we would have with local law enforcement would turn into deportations. And so we can share some of these stories where it was like people driving without a driver's license. So this narrative also that, well, it's criminals that we're taking away. It was a false narrative when we were able to share like a mother taking their daughter, their kids to the store, and they would get pulled over and then they would end up in deportation. Someone calling because they were victims of domestic violence. And then the police showing up and saying, well, we're going to take you both, and now you're both in deportation, right? So this is why for us, SB 54 was important. There was many victories prior to SB 54, but SB 54 really just took a step further and said, we are going to cut as many ties as we have to, that the federal government is not going to say that we're breaking the law. Right, because SB 54 does not break the law, and all we're doing is ensuring that we're doing as a state all that we need to do to work with ICE and leave ICE's job to them and not to the local government. This is also Secure Communities. If you see the green part, that was Secure Communities was a program also under it was under the Bush administration, then came to Obama, but it was also a program where once you were booked, you would put your fingerprints into the system, and then ICE would send a retainer. The locality would hold you, and then ICE would pick you up. But in 2009, when the program was fairly starting, it's just that green area. By 2010, it was a blue area, and this is where we got it here locally. By 2012, it was throughout the United States. Right, so that's something also to point out. And because of these programs, we had the largest number of deportations from 2008 to 2016, with the highest number in 2012. 409,000 folks were deported. And the stories that we heard prior to 2012, 2011 was, like we said, young dreamers that just didn't have a license and had to get to work, and then they would get pulled over. There was a student from San Bernardino Valley College. He was a 17-year-old, went to San Bernardino Valley College to get information about school, was then somehow he was in contact with the police, the school police, who had an agreement that they would take people over to ICE, which was down the street. So a 17-year-old going to college to ask, how can I come to school, ended in deportation because of Secure Communities and 287G. Right? These programs were not keeping anyone safe. They were keeping us unsafe because what it created was distrust between local law enforcement and the community that they're supposed to work with. And then we pass SB 54. I want to give a big shout out to everyone that's here that fought for that. Give yourself a round of applause. And again, we know that this was important to us. It was not about an election. It was not about politics. It was about the community that really was scared. It was about programs like 287G and Secure Communities. It was because of people like Guadalupe, a U.S. citizen, that was transferred from San Bernardino sheriffs to ICE, right? Because she didn't know English and she was a U.S. citizen. This is why SB 54 is important. It is not only for those undocumented people, it is also for U.S. citizens that can get profiled. And so this is why SB 54 was important to us. Another big victory was driver licenses for all AB 60. This was a 20-year battle, a 20-year fight that was led also by CIPC, by the PLC, but also locally. This was a fight that I think locally our folks should take a lot of credit for, because this bill was dead. It was dead, and if it wasn't for these folks getting together one day before the legislature just closed in 2013, we probably wouldn't have licenses up to 2016. But the folks in the Inland Empire fought back and said, no, we want driver licenses because our community needs them. It was really important for us to fight for driver's licenses because locally there were a lot of checkpoints. Think like the rest of California, right? But locally these checkpoints were, we live in an area where we have a lot of low-income communities. Not having a license and getting a ticket would be $600. On top of that, your car would get towed, and you're looking at about $500 to $1,500 just to get your car back, right? And so this AB60 now, we have 1 million driver licenses in California. So once again, I think round of applause to everyone that's here. And then just to wrap up a little bit more about ICIJ. Last year, we were able to conduct over 20 meetings, educational meetings with our elected officials here in Southern California, here in our region, in the Inland Empire, also in Sacramento, but also we were able to take folks to DC, and some of our members were able to go to DC to really fight for the DREAM Act, right, over there. We continue our work around the Adelanto Detention Center, which is the largest detention center here in the West Coast, with a capacity of 1,940 people. And then last year, 3 deaths occurred last year in a matter of like 2 months. So we really continue our campaign to shut down this detention center. The DACA, we know that there was an announcement terminating DACA, hasn't really happened because of the court. However, when this announcement happened with the IAOIC and all of our partners that were ready and to work, we were able to coordinate close to 20 clinics in 1 month, and we reached over 100 youth. And then the San Bernardino Community Services Center and TODEC were giving out checks for people to be able to pay their fees, their filing fees, right? And so people were walking into our clinics, getting support for their DACA, and walking out with a check, right, from these 2 organizations that have been also on the ground for many years. And lastly, our emergency response network. We have trained over 60 people throughout the Inland Empire to just respond to emergencies, respond to deportations, to detentions, and do an intake, but also follow up with the families to see if we can connect them with legal resources or just support in general. And we also raised over $10,000 that has gone out to families. This was last year. I think now we're close to $20,000 that has gone 100% to the families. When they call us, when they need support, we have a fund that we go into and we just give it to them. So that's a little bit about us, ICIJ. We hope that y'all can continue to support the work that we're doing here as a collective and the work that we're doing in the region to really transform this region to a region that is welcoming of immigrants, but also a region that really looks at the issues like the environment, like housing, economic equity, and really inequity, and really find solutions to these issues, and that we can do it together. Social justice and policy doesn't have to be against each other. We can work on these issues together and find solutions together. Thank you.
For justice for our community. Yeah.
I'm short, so let's not pretend. Hi, my name is Michelle Magallan. I'm Associate Director here at the Center for Social Innovation, and I am honored to moderate this panel, and I would love to call up our 4 distinguished panelists. As they come up, I'm going to read a snippet of their bios, as they gave me really amazing bios, and I have to just do the top of each one. So if I can have Aide Arana come up. She just graduated from UCR in 2017. Sociology, Law, and Society. She migrated to the U.S. from Mexico with her parents in 1999 when she was 10 years old. Through the experience of trying to navigate a system with limited resources for healthcare and education for people with similar situations, she became inspired to be actively involved in the immigrant movement. She strongly believes that immigrants who are directly impacted should be at the forefront of conversations about decisions being made that affect them. And if I have Cynthia Luisa come up, she is the executive director for the California Immigrant Policy Center. Cynthia has over 2 decades of experience in nonprofit management and human rights advocacy. Most recently, she managed a statewide capacity building project involving 9 regional coalitions in California, which aims to strengthen these coalitions' viability through a combination of highly customized training, grant making, and leadership coaching. If I can have Cecilia Ayon. School of Public Policy. Dr. Ayon received her PhD in social welfare from the University of Washington in Seattle. In 2008, her research broadly examines factors that promote and hinder Latino immigrant families' well-being, health disparities, and intervention and development and evaluation. And lastly, if I can have Mrs. Luz Maria Ayala come up. Hi. She comes up. From teaching Latino immigrants how to read and become U.S. citizens to organizing with bracieros, pushing for lost wages, Luz Maria Ayala has spent most of her adult life advocating for immigrant rights. Mrs. Ayala, with her husband here, Antonio, founded the Paris-based TODEC Legal Center, a grassroots organization serving migrant communities in Riverside, San Bernardino, and Imperial counties. So thank you for all 4 of my distinguished panelists for coming here today as we talk about community policy and research as they pertain to immigrants in the Inland Empire. Each of these individuals have had their hand in this report, actually. From Mrs. Ayala, she's profiled here with her husband, Antonio. So you can see a quick snippet of her and Antonio's story of being immigrants into the Inland Empire. To Ida, who had she pulled together the profiles in general. And so, she did a wonderful job trying to capture the diversity of the immigrants' story here in the region. Cynthia also authored parts of the report as well, particularly with state and local policies. And Dr. Ayon had her hand throughout, giving her advice and advising through the project. And so it's an honor to not only have them here today, but to be truly in partnership with this project. And so with this panel, I had asked them to think about some of the questions as we think about community policy and research. And with the work that they all do, as mentioned in their bios. And I'll go, I guess, in order, or whoever feels comfortable, with two questions. The first one being, what are 1 or 2 major issues in your work as it relates to immigrants in the Inland Empire?
Well, based on the profiles, I think that some of the major issues that I thought were that even though we have the California Values Act currently, there's still like a lack of trust between the immigrant community and law enforcement. Sorry, you hear me? Oh, sorry. Okay, so what I saw was that even though we have the California Values Act, there's still a lack of trust between the immigrant community and local law enforcement, right? A lot of the interviewees from the profiles mentioned that they're not 100% sure if they would call local law enforcement if anything was to happen or anything needed to be reported, because they still feel some sort of disconnect, and they feel like there would be maybe some repercussions if they contacted local law enforcement.
If I may just expound a little bit on the question and put some emphasis on the relationship between regional work, like what the region does, what ICIJ does vis-a-vis the statewide work, because as a statewide organization who's been around for 21 years, our work has always been rooted in the power of the local. In the last 10 years, we helped pass 30 pro-immigrant policies, and that was not going to be possible if there was not a symphonic relationship between regions like the Inland Empire and the work that we do in the state. And I really want to take this opportunity as well to thank the Immigrant Coalition for Immigrant Justice and Center for Social Innovation, because I believe that this is not just an evolving partnership, this is an overdue work. And so our interest in working in the region came from the fact that if we do not address the disparities that exist between the gateway cities, which is Los Angeles and San Francisco, vis-a-vis the needs of the inland regions where many immigrants are going. And we saw this in the last 5 years when we began implementing the capacity building project that is what the organization hosts. We saw that while immigrants are being pushed out of these expensive places because they can no longer afford to live there, there was very limited infrastructure that existed in the regions. And we thought, with what is coming down the pipe in terms of where immigrant communities are, the tremendous amount of pressure we are under today. And you know that once you get out of this room, we're going to go back to the reality that every day there's a crisis in immigrant communities. And if the regions are not strong to respond to that, where immigrants live, then we are creating further marginalization in our community. So this is not even a philosophical conversation anymore. This is not a theoretical idea. We need to empower the local so that the state is powerful. That is the only way it is going to work, because California is under a lot of pressure right now. Yes, we are calling ourselves the vanguard of the resistance, but if the Inland Empire did not fully throw its weight behind implementing the driver's license law meticulously and powerfully, we will not have 1 million undocumented drivers driving in the streets of California. So I think we need to remove the artificial barriers that we create around what city has more resources, what doesn't. You know, LA has been held as a model for too long, but what is keeping San Bernardino and Riverside from not being held as a model as well? So I think, in as much as I want to emphasize that my organization is committed to working with our partners here, because that is what we have been doing for the last 20 years. It's amazing to see the growth that's going on. I think the work that we have to do now is how are we going to continue to work together to respond to the emergencies that is being lobbed at us every day, versus sustaining this progress that we have built in the region. They are not false choices. The pressure on us is to do them at the same time, do them meaningfully, and do them while fighting for the resources that we need to accomplish it. Because it's just our communities and our futures on the line. It really is. I wish I could just, sugarcoat how big the challenges we're facing. We're facing the challenge of this administration, and forgive me if I have to go there, trying to undo the civil rights infrastructure in California. And if Inland Empire cannot protect the infrastructure that's built here, Orange County, San Diego, we have a problem. So let's not allow ourselves to be dragged back into 1994, 1996. In Prop 187 years, it's not acceptable. And so I think that's what I'm saying in answer to your question is the opportunity exists. If you are not yet convinced about it, be convinced about it today. When you leave this room, see which partnerships you can have with us, with ICIJ, with CSI, with the folks in the room, because that is how we translate the aspirations we're talking about today here in this room into a reality for our communities.
Thank you, Cynthia. Cecilia?
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be part of this panel today, and the way that I'm going to approach answering this question is based on my experience as a researcher, and specifically a community-based researcher. So in the last couple years, I'm new to UCR and recently back in the region. I spent some time interacting with different organizations like the ICIJ and other organizations that serve immigrants in the region. And some of the things that I've heard are very much related to what Javier said. There's the intersection of multiple issues, right? So immigration is just one, it doesn't just impact one issue, it impacts very many issues. So like Aida said, there's a lot of fear among families. If I'm talking to someone that's looking at health, they're gonna look at the intersection of immigration and health. Some of the things that we've heard is that people are really fearful to access services and care or they're very hyper vigilant about how that information will be used. So in order to avoid that, they're avoiding visiting healthcare services or accessing healthcare services. Last week, I spoke to some people in the school district, and they shared how many families, they noticed an attendance drop in the children in the last couple of years, and how in this resource center, families are actually not as likely to go if they haven't already built that relationship. So again, it's the intersection of many factors, and depending what type of space you're in, it's gonna look differently. So one of the things that we're trying to do through the Center for Social Innovation, through the Immigrant Research Group, is that we're gonna build a community-based, community advisory board. Because we want any research that comes out of the center to really reflect the needs and the priorities of the community. So by this, I mean that we're going to invite people who are members of the community, who are representatives of organizations that serve immigrants, to really have a discussion about what are the issues that we need to address, how do they intersect, and what are the priorities we should focus on moving forward. So that way, any research that we do actually does inform any policy making or any service, or looking at the way that we provide services or the type of services that are needed. So it reflects all those needs.
I'm going to be translating.
Mi nombre es Luz María Ayala y como yo miro el condado en este tiempo es algo muy grande porque antes teníamos campos, había mucha necesidad, pero lo más importante de todo esto es que cada trabajador debe de ser un organizador y tenemos que ir a la base donde se sufre, donde está el campesino, cuál es la problemática para hacer un análisis de la realidad. Y ahora, de todos estos años de trabajo, yo veo un cambio grandísimo, porque antes eran aquí puros campos y teníamos que organizar a los campesinos que trabajaban en la cebolla, ya para o sea, todo en indio, pero lo que se tiene que hacer y tener este análisis de la realidad que tenemos es grande, porque tenemos que empezar desde la base, donde está la gente más empobrecida, donde se necesita la necesidad. Y todo esto, hemos logrado muchas cosas, porque ahora podemos saber que nuestra comunidad ha subido bastante. Porque la gente en los campos no sabe leer ni escribir. Tenemos que ir a ver qué están haciendo los campesinos, donde empezamos con todo el estudio enseñándoles cómo también la problemática que no tenían documentos. Y se necesitaban los campesinos porque no había quien hiciera el trabajo. Entonces logramos, y nos fuimos a Washington, logramos que los campesinos iban a arreglar sus papeles por 95 días de trabajo. Lo que se tiene que hacer, que es muy importante lo que hemos hecho, que cada trabajador es un organizador y que tenemos que ir a la base donde está la problemática, donde está el campesino, donde trabajan, y es muchos logros que hemos tenido.
So I'm going to translate. What Luz Maria Ayala said, our founder, said basically that looking back in history when they first came to the Inland Empire, we have seen, although we're still struggling with a lot of things, but the reality of the Inland Empire is totally different from when they first migrated here to this region, where there was not only discrimination with labor, but also with immigration. And she mentions that as they started organizing, as they started advocating at the national level to get the amnesty passed, and once the amnesty passed, that's when the organization started organizing the farm workers one by one, making sure that they had their legal paperwork in place, and teaching them literacy, teaching them English, but always going to the grassroots, a grassroots movement that has definitely changed the region, and really focusing a lot, mainly in the civic engagement, because we knew that all these folks that we helped through the IRCA, which was in the amnesty, we're going to become citizens. And that's what we have concentrated in it with the organization. Though it was to build the community, to build power at the local level. We have seen the shift. I know a lot of our colleagues here talked about the shift, but it took a lot of work. It took years organizing like little ants without resources, but the power of the people was there. And we have seen the shift as we continue to concentrate on our civic engagement movement, building the capacity, building the power of our region, as we have helped over 100,000 immigrants become U.S. citizens in the Inland Empire. And we have seen how that has shifted our region, where our electeds are actually calling us. What are you guys supporting? And they're listening, and we're holding them accountable, because at the end of the day, they represent the community. And this is what we need to continue concentrating that everybody, we need to be in this together, and that every single person is an organizer.
Thank you. For the sake of time, we're running out of time, and so I'm just going to throw one more question, and it's going to be, if you had one tool in your toolbox that you see as your greatest asset, as we talk about, the threat of the shift, if we move back to Prop 187 days, what is the one tool in your toolbox that you go to in terms of, as we talk about resources and strategies? So, Aide, do you have, or do you want Cynthia to go?
So I'm a Taurian, so I tend to be a bit contrarian. So I'm gonna share two tools in my toolbox. Well, one is I think for us, what has always worked, and we proved that it's always going to work, is centering the immigrant refugee community experience in our work. No matter the temptation to create some pseudo-political strategy so that we can interact with power in a different sense, at the end of the day, if you don't meaningfully center what are the true needs of your communities, you're gonna have the wrong solution. So that's very important for my organization. And the second is, I think for us, we have the privilege, in all humility, to have that, to be able to do the 200-foot view, but also the 20,000-foot view because of our role in the state. We convene 9 regional coalitions. We have 14 steering committee members across the state, many of whom are in this room. So there's a good mechanism for feedback where we know what's going on the ground. We can lift it up in the Capitol and create this conversation where it's dynamic and there's texture to it. And so if I were to just dream with you this afternoon, I hope that little by little we can mainstream powerful state strategies into the Inland Empire or vice versa. Wouldn't it be great if CSI has the ability to do research and development work that serves the community, and at the same time we can utilize that R&D capacity to do our advocacy work in the county and in the state, and at the same time really a challenge to the community here. Let's lobby for the creation of a county office of immigrant integration.
Thank you. Any other tools in the toolbox?
Lo más importante para nosotros es nuestra comunidad y todo tiene que empezar desde la base, desde donde está el más necesitado. Y lo más importante que hemos estado haciendo por años y años es ir a donde están los campos, donde están los campesinos, que gracias a ellos tenemos la comida, a enseñarlos a leer, a escribir. Y también gente que sabe leer, pero lo más importante es enseñarles cómo es saber leer, cómo saber, cómo vamos a hacernos ciudadanos. Porque hemos cogido el empoderamiento del nuevo ciudadano, porque no nomás somos la gente que trabajamos en el campo, sino toda la gente que va viniendo de otros países, y tenemos que tener una visión grande, porque esa es la visión que hemos tomado nosotros en nuestra organización, de que cada trabajador es un organizador, pero también nosotros tenemos que ir a la base, y lo que hemos estado haciendo mucho es trabajando con los campesinos y también sus proyectos del nuevo ciudadano también, que es lo más importante para que nuestra comunidad coge el empoderamiento y también pueda decidir en las votaciones.
What she mentions is always starting from the grassroots, and I like what Cynthia said, that it has to start at the grassroots. Anything that, any issues that we work with as we're dealing with organizing, and I think that's one of our strengths as an organization is continue the grassroots movement and organizing the community, because that's the to-go. That for us, it's the tool how we have made change. Not only dealing with grassroots organizing, community organizing, base building, but also the civic engagement, which what Luz Maria spoke about, becoming citizens, making sure we're getting out the vote, and elevating the voices of the needs of the community. So I would say community organizing, advocacy, and civic engagement.
I have time for one more response. So
Actually, we're out of time. So.
Karthik's kicking us out. So I apologize, as we want to make sure the other panel has time also to speak. But if you want to know what the other two boxes are, that means you have to stay after the event and ask them. Thank you.
So now we're gonna. I swear you're gonna get through them. There's food and drink outside, but we're gonna have a brief panel with program officers in philanthropic organizations that have invested heavily in this region and whose expertise we can draw upon. So I'll ask Jessica Kazmarek from James Irvine Foundation, Margarita Luna from California Endowment, hey, and Bee Nguyen from Weinberg Foundation. So I'll say, like in the last panel, the energy and talent and the future of this region depends on women and strong female leaders. The first question I have, and we don't need to go in order, is just what's based on the investments that you've made, but just on your observation and your work with community organizations, what signs of progress do you see in this region with respect to immigrant rights and immigrant integration?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So the Irvine Foundation, through its immigrants' rights work, we have been funding coalitions in different regions throughout California to really help us get resources to immigrant organizations that support folks on the ground and do re-granting. And so that's a core piece to us, is helping to get resources down into the ground locally. And so our partner here has been ICIJ, which has been a great partnership because it has allowed more resources to go into the region and has also allowed ICIJ to build its capacity to continue to support local groups and to be at tables that continue to raise the profile of the region, to continue to educate other funders and other stakeholders about the assets here in the region as well as the needs. And so that's something that we see as being a real positive, is by being able to elevate the local leaders here who can help to continue to raise the region's profile.
So others on the table?
Hi everyone, I'm so excited and honored to be here, and thank you Karthik and CSI, the Community Foundation, as well as CIPC for organizing this event. I think that what I would just add to what Jessica was sharing is that for Weingart, we are a regional funder. We fund in Southern California in 6 counties, and we're what we call a responsive funder, so we respond to requests that come to us. And over the past number of years, we've also had the honor and the privilege of funding ICIJ and many of the member organizations as well. And I think that from my perspective, and I will add that I'm based in Los Angeles, so I think many of you all in the audience know this area intimately. But from our perspective as a funder, what we've seen over time is just the really impressive amount of capacity that the area has built, the resilience, right, and the continued growth of the local organizations. And I think for Weingart, so one of our interests is really in supporting the infrastructure of organizations. We provide what we call unrestricted operating support, and it really is designed to support organizations in growing their effectiveness and capacity. And we have seen and been really, really impressed by the growth in organizational development. So, areas like fundraising capacity, staff capacity, board development, as well as communications capacity. Folks have increased their programmatic capacity and their, for instance, BIA accreditation and ability to provide legal services. So we've seen that and been really impressed. And then also a growth in connecting to statewide and then even national networks. So I understand that ICIJ is now part of this national network called Delivering on the Dream, right, which connects the organization to immigrant rights organizations around the country, working with CIPC, of course. And then I think that one area that we've always seen and continue to be impressed by is, I think what Javier mentioned, in terms of the real orientation towards intersectionality and looking, beyond single community, right? So working to build with Muslim and African American communities, and then also an orientation to be beyond single issues. So really looking at housing, looking at healthcare, looking at education as well.
There isn't a lot much more to add to what these wonderful colleagues have already spoken to, but once again, thank you for having me. So I remember being one of the first funders of ICIJ when it used to be called Justice for Immigrants Coalition. And it was actually the Haas Junior Fund that brought me to the table and said, there's this amazing coalition of grassroots organizations that are doing great work. You need to put some money here. And so I said, yes, absolutely, let's do that. And to see the growth in the coalition and the growth of the partners around the table has been really phenomenal. I think one of the things that has been important is also its sophistication, from moving from putting out fires, which it continues to do every day, but to moving towards thinking more about strategic communications and how do they message the work that they're doing so that they're winning more allies in their fight has been really, really important. I think the other thing has been the coalescing of funders around immigrants' issues. At the outset of building healthy communities for the endowment, immigration was just one of those issues that we just saw that was just larger than life. And we just felt a little intimidated to wade into that area. But we just found that we actually didn't have the privilege to not be in that space anymore because of the impacts it was having on health were very real in these communities. So to see us sort of jump in there and with gusto, and I think, because of the changing landscape, absolutely seeing not just funding advocacy, but funding direct services, making sure that we're putting money for, DACA renewals. That was really exciting to see the endowment sort of step in that way, which is very non-traditional in terms of the work that we have done in the past.
Great. Thank you, Margarita. And we'll start with you now so that maybe other people won't steal your thunder. So what lessons do you think our region can learn from others? I mean, we think we're doing a lot of things great here, and other places can learn from us, but what can we learn from other places?
It's hard to tell, to be honest with you, because I feel like we're doing such amazing work here, maybe because I'm just so steeped in the community that I just know the work that you all are doing. I think the one thing that I'd like to see more of is really work around civic engagement, because we do have sort of mixed status families, and it's important that it's important that we think about a civic engagement strategy that is really integrated in the way that we're organizing these communities to ensure that folks are voting. And that they understand what the issues are in terms of what they're voting for is really critical, because I feel like that lends itself towards power building, which ultimately makes sure that we're changing the policies that are continuing to oppress these communities.
I did want to say, Margarita was the funder who introduced me to ICIJ. So it's wonderful to, we're always learning from each other and learning from communities. So thank you for that. I think that one of the things, so my role at the foundation is immigrant rights and integration is one of our areas of special focus. We fund very, very broadly, but there are a few areas. One is housing and homelessness, for instance. The other is immigrant rights and integration, where we feel like kind of a more focused strategy can be more helpful. So that is one of the areas that I work in at the Weingart Foundation, and I do it in our 6-county region. So there are a few other things I think that, I think there's so much to learn from this region. If I think about maybe lessons from other regions, I would say that one is that it's so important to build up a nonprofit infrastructure, right? And to really, communities, there are areas that have been so disinvested in, right? And we as funders really need to step up and think about these quote unquote nonprofit deserts and how to continue to support the capacity of these regions, because it really is about groups. What we hear from groups is the need for this flexible, many times unrestricted support that allows groups to be resilient, right, in the ups and the downs. So there is that. In Los Angeles, I think one of the things that Karthik mentioned, which is positive, is that we are increasingly building these sort of cross-sector partnerships. So there's the nonprofit infrastructure, there's funders who are supportive, hopefully a growing number of them, and then increasingly government. So we do have a city Office of Immigrant Affairs, as is mentioned in the report. We now have a county Office of Immigrant Affairs as well, and then labor and business are also at the table. So that's one thing to think about. In Orange County, that's an area where we've seen great strides in terms of talking about immigration. That is also, that's a community that has historically been pretty conservative, right, and not so welcoming to immigrants, but that is evolving. So one of the things that we've seen with our partners at the Orange County Community Foundation has been a strategy that tries to make the business case around immigration, and they found some success, I think, there, looking at the economics of it. And then in the Central Coast, because we also fund in Santa Barbara, Ventura, that's also a community where folks are making strides, but in some ways looking to move the community as well. And I don't know how much progress they've made on this at the moment, but one of the conversations I think is starting is looking at the role of agriculture. And if there's a possibility to split agriculture, to look for allies in that area. So don't know if any of those conversations are helpful here, but that's something that I think they're starting to do in the Central Coast.
It is hard to go last because it's hard to build on or add anything that's new. I think one thing that I would say is maybe there are other regions in California that definitely know how to talk and advocate for themselves in a way that really emphasizes the strengths and the assets in the region, the leadership that exists, and those assets definitely exist here, and they need to continue to be invested in to continue to grow and to show success and to achieve impact. And so I think that is one thing that maybe we can continue to learn how to do here and strengthen our ability to do, is talk about leaders like ICIJ and the partners that they have in the coalition. There is a lot of really great work that's being done for our immigrant community, and we need to talk about it, not from a deficit point of view, but from the strength of the leadership that exists.
So I will maybe use that to actually close this session out. I had another question, but I think, again, we do have food that you all need to eat before we go. But it's very much part of what today is about and what our center is about, is to help change that dynamic. There's so many assets that are already here, and how can we interlock better and not only put on these kind of events, but this report, this is just the beginning of the dissemination for this report. We're going to be sending this to virtually every local government agency in the two-county region, to various nonprofits, social service providers, health providers, so that everyone has a baseline understanding of the immigrant population in this region, to go beyond the stereotypes, beyond some of these maybe outdated notions they may have, to see the immigrant population as it exists and as it evolves into the future. I'll just thank a couple of other people who helped make this report possible. Maurice Osorio, who's standing in the back. Sunny Shao, who's back there, graduate student, both graduate students here. And ICIJ and all of the partner organizations in ICIJ, I can't emphasize how critical that is. The strength of the collective depends on the individual strength of each organization as well. And so really just so grateful for everyone here in terms of not only making this possible, but carrying this work forward. Please join me in thanking our panelists. Within the organization, in terms of not just advocating, but help these large funders understand our region better. So I'm very hopeful in terms of what this represents in terms of moving forward. And please join us outside to continue the conversation and continue the networking. Thank you.